Hey guys, calling back with another video tonight. This is my normal weekly video I usually do, except this time I'm not using the green screen effects and stuff. You're just seeing the down and dirty garage here because I didn't feel like fooling with all of that stuff tonight because it takes so long. Um, and maybe I'll do these off and on, and I'll call them the down and dirty garage episodes or something. I didn't even turn down my phone. But anyway, a lot of you know I like stories. I like listening to stories. I like reading stories. Sometimes I tell some stories. And I got a couple of records here that I've picked up over the last, during my collecting career. And one of them is Orson Welles' The War of the Worlds. Fake war stirs terror through the U.S. And this is an actual recording of the broadcast, which was aired on October 30th, 1938. And this is a broadcast of Orson Welles, and that by now really famous broadcast where he scared the crap out of a bunch of people thinking there was an alien invasion going on. And later on, this eventually became several movies. And I have several storytelling or old radio show type of records in my collection. And I just kind of wanted to know or see if any of you guys had any of these types of records in your stuff that you really don't listen to very often, probably. But yet you have them. And this one's The War of the Worlds. And here's another old radio broadcast. And this one is The Adventures of the Lone Ranger. And I have two or three of these Lone Ranger records, as well as some recordings on reel-to-reel tape that I found. Um, and what do we do now, old friend? What do you mean? What we do now, Paleface? Or he should have said Kimosabi. But anyway, there's the Lone Ranger. I remember watching this show a lot when I was a kid. The old black and white stuff, which were reruns. Uh, and I've always liked the Lone Ranger. And I was just wondering, again, do any of you have any of these types of storytelling records in your collection? Or perhaps maybe you call them oddball records. A lot of people call these oddball records. And I have more than this. I have the Green Hornet, and Superman, and Spider-Man, and different things like that. And that's kind of where this little episode is going, is storytelling. Um, in some of my older videos, I used to always show, the books and comic books and things like that. And I still pick up books now and then. Now, the latest one that I found is this one called The Wild Adventures in Wild Places. And this is kind of a compilation of stories. I believe it may have been released for children. Um, and I just kind of picked it up and started looking at it. And I looked at the inside of the cover, and it says, To Florence, from her father, December 25th, 1882. And I kind of started flipping through the pages and things here. And this little postcard happened to fall out. And this postcard is dated October 21st, 1914, from Fort Worth, Texas, to Miss Florence F. I won't say her last name, Valley Falls, Kansas. And it says, Dear Florence, I'm trying to read it. I can't hardly read it too well because it's it's hard to read somebody's writing. Dear Florence, Postal and Package Services, something about you have my thanks for something. We'll write in the future days. Have the paper hunger. I don't know. Anyway, this is to this Florence lady from her mother, and it just happened to fall out of Florence's book here. But this is dated 1914, and apparently Florence here kept this book for all of those years. And it does have a lot of illustrations in it like this. And if you feel them, they feel like they're raised up off of the paper. And I know there's a name for this, but I just can't quite figure out right now. I forgot what it's called. And as you can tell there, there's a gentleman shooting a bear type illustration. Um, and on the bottom it says close quarters. But like I said, this is several different stories about wild adventures and things. And here's a person in a canoe there out in the woods. They're very, very nice illustrations. And I thought I would read a little bit of this like I used to. Sometimes I would read stuff. And this is chapter 1 of Wild Adventures in Wild Places. And this is part 1, The Moors and Fens of England. In the depths of the forest, Frank and his toad, a day with the hounds, the furies leap, the fox was my fate. There is no doubt at all that when young Frank Willoughby brought out his book with him and seated himself on the trunk of the old fallen tree, he meant to read it. But this intention had soon been abandoned, and at the moment our tale commences, the book lay on the grass at his feet, and Frank was dreaming. He was not asleep, not a bit of it. His eyes were as wide open as yours or mine, or at this moment. But there was a faraway look in them, and you could tell by the cloud that seemed to hang on his lowered brow that his thoughts were none of the pleasantest. He was not alone, at least not quite, for not a yard from him, from his feet, there sat gazing up into his face. Why, what do you think? A great toad. Do not start. Men in solitude have taken up with stranger companions than this. And that's like the first little page there of this Wild Adventures in Wild Places, and that's one of the books I picked up recently with that postcard inside of it. And I usually don't pick that type of stuff up, but I just found that interesting that the postcard was still in there from Florence's mother, and she kept it inside her book that she had probably when she was a child that her father gave her. And that's a story right there. And I have still been kind of writing some of my own little stories now and then, mostly a lot of things about memories of my childhood, and I kind of put them into a little story like. And this one I'm going to read you after I have a little cheers here. It's about going to the drive-in movies with my mom and dad when I was a kid. Little feet dragging along rocks crushed from a far-off river place. Those pebbles were crushed by some father who forgets himself an aluminum yellow hard hat. The big screen above is full of black and white zombies thirsting for brains in some insane laundry house where everything turns green. Meanwhile, in the background, a 1972 red VW bus becomes faded with the workers who came here for a vacation away from life and drunken drug-out softball games, played around a never-ending parenthood. Looking up at the stars, the kid knows his destiny is above this. Somehow this cool night alone with zombies will become a lifelong struggle inside concession stands, popcorn popping with butter smells from 6 feet below, small feet dragging on crushed stones. I don't have a title for that or anything. That's just something I wrote down when it popped in my head. And that's kind of the little storytelling part about this. And if you remember last week, I showed you a little eagle figure that I was going to paint. And at the end of this video, I'll put a picture of the finished eagle that I painted. I've been kind of getting into this miniature painting deal. I know my hobbies and stuff are all over the place, but I'm always keep myself occupied. And the next figure I'm going to paint is this little crazy looking eyeball dude. I think he's a Dungeons and Dragons figure. He's called the Beholder, the Eye of the Beholder, or Eyes in this case. And he's kind of a scary dude. I'm going to paint him up this weekend, and I'll show him in next weekend's video and show you how he came out. And that's my video for today. And Colin, over and out, and Weirdos Unite.